You know what's funny? People spend months creating plans against you. They whisper, they calculate, they smile in your face while hoping you never figure it out. They think they're 10 moves ahead. They believe they control the board, but they forgot something. The strongest weapon isn't money. It isn't power. It isn't even revenge. Sometimes, it's one sentence, just one sentence. One truth spoken at the right moment can bring down years of lies. One calm answer can expose fake loyalty. One fearless statement can destroy everything they carefully built in the dark. And the most terrifying part? You didn't scream. You didn't beg. You didn't fight. You simply spoke. And suddenly, their confidence disappeared. Their masks started falling. Their perfect plan began collapsing right in front of them. Because people can survive your silence, but they rarely survive the truth. Tonight, we're talking about the sentence they never expected to hear, the sentence that destroyed everything they planned, and by the end of this message, you'll understand why some words are more dangerous than any weapon ever created. Most people think destruction arrives with noise. They expect betrayal to reveal itself through obvious signs. They imagine hidden enemies making careless mistakes or exposing themselves with reckless actions. But reality is much different. The most dangerous plans are often built in silence. Smiles hide intentions. Compliments cover jealousy. Support disguises manipulation. And while you're focused on moving forward, someone else is focused on controlling the direction of your journey. People who operate in the shadows rely on one thing above everything else. They rely on ignorance. They rely on confusion. They rely on the hope that you never notice what is happening behind the curtain. Because the moment truth enters the room, everything they carefully constructed begins to shake. Lies require maintenance. Deception requires constant effort. False images demand endless performances. And eventually, maintaining those illusions becomes impossible. That's why truth is feared by people with hidden motives. Not because truth is loud, but because it doesn't need to be. Truth has a strange power. It doesn't beg for attention. It doesn't fight for validation. It simply exists. And when reality finally becomes visible, excuses lose their power. Manipulation loses its influence. Masks begin to crack. The people who appeared untouchable suddenly become ordinary. The people who looked powerful suddenly appear desperate. Many individuals spend years creating stories that benefit them. They shape narratives. They control conversations. They influence opinions. They convince others that they are innocent, loyal, and trustworthy. But no matter how impressive the performance, truth remains patient. Truth doesn't rush. It doesn't panic. It waits. And eventually, time exposes what acting can no longer protect. That's why some people become uncomfortable when you start asking questions. They become nervous when you stop accepting appearances. They become defensive when you refuse to follow blindly. Because awareness threatens control. Understanding threatens manipulation. And knowledge destroys dependency. Those who gain power through deception can only survive when others remain asleep. The moment you begin seeing things clearly, everything changes. Suddenly, words are no longer enough to fool you. Promises no longer impress you. Empty loyalty no longer satisfies you. You begin paying attention to actions. You notice patterns. You recognize contradictions. You see the difference between people who support your growth and people who benefit from your growth. Confusion. And that realization makes certain individuals uncomfortable because they were never expecting you to understand. They expected obedience. They expected trust without evidence. They expected endless patience while they continued playing their games. What they never expected was clarity. What they never prepared for was someone who refused to ignore reality. Truth has ended friendships. Truth has destroyed false alliances. Truth has exposed hidden agendas. Truth has shattered carefully built reputations. Not because truth is cruel, but because lies are fragile. No structure built on dishonesty can survive forever. Sooner or later, cracks appear. Sooner or later, reality speaks louder than manipulation. People often fear the truth because they assume it creates pain. But pain doesn't come from truth. Pain comes from discovering how long deception has been present. Pain comes from realizing that trust was misplaced. Pain comes from understanding that appearances were never reality. Yet even painful truth is more valuable than comfortable lies, because lies create prisons, while truth creates freedom. Freedom begins the moment you stop denying what you already know. It begins when you stop making excuses for people who repeatedly reveal their intentions. It begins when you stop pretending that disrespect is loyalty and manipulation is love. Clarity is not cruelty. Awareness is not negativity. Seeing reality for what it truly is the beginning of strength. Some individuals spend their entire lives protecting illusions because illusions feel safer than truth. They prefer fantasy over reality. They prefer comfort over understanding. But avoiding truth doesn't change reality. It only delays the moment when reality eventually arrives. And when it does, it often arrives without warning. The hidden plan always depends on darkness. It depends on secrecy. It depends on confusion. But truth is like light entering a room that was never prepared for exposure. Suddenly, details become visible. Suddenly, intentions become obvious. Suddenly, the pieces connect. And the people who once seemed impossible to understand become easy to read. Because no matter how sophisticated the scheme, no matter how convincing the performance, and no matter how long deception survives, hidden plans have one weakness they can never overcome: truth. People often misunderstand silence. They think silence means weakness. They assume that if someone isn't constantly defending themselves, arguing, or explaining every move, then they have nothing to say. They mistake quietness for fear and patience for surrender. That's why so many people underestimate those who speak less. They expect reactions. They expect emotional explosions. They expect desperation. But they fail to understand that words become powerful when they are not wasted. Most people speak because they are uncomfortable with silence. They rush to explain themselves. They reveal their thoughts too quickly. They expose their emotions before understanding the intentions of the people around them. They believe every accusation deserves a response, and every misunderstanding demands an explanation. In their urgency to be understood, they give away their strength without realizing it. Silence changes that. Silence creates space. It gives you time to observe instead of react. It allows emotions to settle and truth to reveal itself. While others are busy talking, defending, complaining, and exposing themselves, the quiet person is watching. Patterns become visible. Motives become easier to recognize. Hidden agendas become harder to hide. People often reveal more about themselves when they believe nobody is paying attention. Those who talk endlessly usually reveal their fears. Their insecurities escape through unnecessary explanations. Their intentions leak through emotional reactions. But silence keeps your mind clear. It prevents you from making decisions based on anger. It stops you from speaking words you cannot take back. It allows you to understand situations from a position of control rather than chaos. There is something unsettling about someone who remains calm when everyone expects a reaction. People become uncomfortable when they cannot predict you. They become nervous when they cannot manipulate your emotions. They become frustrated when their insults fail to provoke you. Many individuals survive by controlling the emotions of others. They depend on your anger. They feed on your fear. They expect you to defend yourself immediately, but silence interrupts their expectations. Silence does not mean accepting disrespect. It does not mean becoming passive. It means refusing to give your energy away cheaply. It means understanding that not every battle deserves your attention. Some arguments exist only to distract you. Some people provoke you because they want access to your emotions. They want you angry. They want you unstable. They want you distracted. Because distracted people make mistakes. Powerful words are born from restraint. A person who speaks constantly eventually becomes noise. Their message loses impact because everything they say receives the same level of importance. But when someone chooses their moments carefully, people listen differently. They understand that those words were not spoken out of emotion. They were spoken with intention. That's why silence gives value to your voice. When you are always talking, people stop listening. When you are constantly explaining yourself, People stop respecting your boundaries. But when you speak only when necessary, every sentence carries weight. Every word feels deliberate. Every statement demands attention. Many people destroy their own influence because they cannot tolerate being misunderstood. They rush to defend themselves against rumors. They fight every opinion. They try to convince everyone to see their perspective. But not everyone deserves access to your explanations. Not everyone deserves your energy. Sometimes silence exposes people more effectively than arguments ever could. There are moments when your silence forces others to reveal who they really are. Without resistance, manipulators become desperate. Without arguments, liars begin contradicting themselves. Without emotional reactions, attention seekers lose their power. People who rely on chaos become uncomfortable when they face calmness. They do not know how to fight someone who refuses to participate in their games. Silence also protects your future. Every unnecessary word creates opportunities for regret. Every emotional reaction creates openings for manipulation. Every careless explanation gives others information they may use against you. But silence protects your thoughts until the right moment arrives. It allows wisdom to replace impulse. It transforms reactions into decisions. The strongest people are not always the loudest. They are often the ones who understand timing. They understand that speaking too soon weakens the message. They understand that emotions pass, but words remain. They understand that patience creates clarity. And they understand that when the moment finally comes, a single sentence spoken with confidence carries more force than 1,000 words spoken in panic. Because silence is not emptiness. Silence is preparation. Silence is discipline. Silence is awareness. And when silence has done its work, when observation has revealed the truth, and when the time arrives to finally speak, those few words carry a weight that noise could never create. Fear has convinced millions of people to remain silent when they should have spoken. It has convinced them to accept disrespect, tolerate manipulation, and ignore the truth, simply because they were afraid of what might happen if they finally said what needed to be said. They worried about losing approval. They worried about being misunderstood. They worried about making enemies. And because of that fear, they spent years carrying words inside them that had the power to change everything. People often believe that change requires dramatic actions. They imagine massive sacrifices, endless struggles, and impossible circumstances. But history has shown something different. Entire relationships have changed because of one honest conversation. Lives have changed because of one decision. Empires of deception have fallen because somebody refused to remain silent. Sometimes transformation doesn't begin with actions. Sometimes it begins with words spoken without fear. Most people live inside invisible prisons created by their own hesitation. They know what they should say, but they remain quiet. They know what they deserve, but they settle for less. They know what is wrong, but they pretend everything is normal. Not because they are weak, but because fear whispers that silence is safer. Fear promises protection. Fear offers comfort. But comfort often becomes a cage that slowly destroys confidence and self-respect. There comes a moment when pretending becomes more painful than honesty. There comes a point when carrying unspoken truths becomes heavier than the consequences of speaking. And when that moment arrives, courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is choosing truth despite fear. Courage is refusing to sacrifice your voice to protect the feelings of those who never cared about yours. People who manipulate others rely heavily on fear. They rely on your hesitation. They rely on your desire to avoid conflict. They rely on your need for approval. As long as you are afraid, they remain comfortable. As long as you remain silent, they remain powerful. But fear loses its influence the moment you decide that truth matters more than temporary peace. One fearless sentence can change the direction of your entire life. It can end years of emotional exhaustion. It can destroy false expectations. It can expose disrespect that people have normalized. It can force reality into situations built on lies. One sentence spoken with conviction can create boundaries where there were none before. It can create freedom where there was once fear. Many people underestimate the power of boundaries because they confuse kindness with weakness. They think being a good person means accepting everything. They believe loyalty means tolerating betrayal. They assume love means endless sacrifice without respect. But fearless words have the ability to remind people that kindness does not mean surrender. Compassion does not mean obedience. Respect cannot exist without honesty. The world becomes uncomfortable when someone who was expected to stay silent finally speaks. People who benefited from your silence become confused. Those who controlled you become angry. Those who underestimated you suddenly become cautious, not because you changed overnight, but because they never expected resistance. They became accustomed to your patience. They became comfortable with your silence. They assumed you would continue accepting whatever they gave you. But something changes when fear no longer controls your decisions. You stop explaining yourself to people determined to misunderstand you. You stop chasing approval from individuals who never intended to respect you. You stop shrinking yourself to fit inside the expectations of others. You begin understanding that peace built on silence is not peace at all. It is surrender, disguised as harmony. Fearless words are dangerous because they expose reality. They force people to confront truths they have avoided. They remove excuses. They destroy illusions. They make manipulation difficult. That's why some individuals react with anger when they hear honesty. Not because honesty is cruel, but because reality threatens the stories they created for themselves. The most powerful words are rarely complicated. They are often simple. They are direct. They are spoken without hatred and without desperation. They carry confidence because they come from self-respect. They do not seek permission. They do not beg for acceptance. They simply acknowledge what is true. And once those words leave your mouth, something changes inside you. The weight you've carried becomes lighter. The fear that controlled you becomes smaller. The uncertainty that once consumed your mind begins to disappear. Because every time you choose courage over fear, you remind yourself that your voice has value. You remind yourself that your truth matters. You remind yourself that no matter how long you stayed silent, there is always a moment when one fearless sentence has the power to change everything people thought they knew about you, everything they expected from you, and everything they believed they could control.